Good morning.
Good morning.
First, I would like to say to anybody listening online, due to several absences today, we might be experiencing some technical difficulties this morning with audio and video. So we please ask you to be patient with us and Tracy trying to do it alone today. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart, where we strive to put love at the center of how we show up in the world. So each week during our Sunday service, we join by reciting our affirmation of faith together. It's in your order of service. Please join me. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer, and this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Since not everyone can attend in person, we are trying to stream this service online, and we extend a special welcome to those that are joining us virtually. Please be patient with us. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will pause during that time. Other than that, this worship service is being recorded and will be available for future viewing on our website. Please turn off or silence your devices. Today, our worship service will be led by our minister, Pastor Tom. Now, take a breath. And another. And join us in the spirit of reverence. For millennia, people have gathered together to hear stories, to root for the underdog, to jeer the evil and the unkind. We see in our stories mirrors to our lives, where we hope good things will happen to good people, and that evil will be vanquished. This morning we gather for a story, for cheering and jeering, for hope and for justice. May this ancient story shed new light on our own lives, and may we know ourselves connected to millions of listeners who have come before us and millions of listeners who will come after. Let us worship together. That was beautiful, Jeremy. The flaming chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism. It suggests the transformation that takes place when we are held within religious community. When we light the chalice in worship, we illuminate a world that we feel called upon to serve with love and a sense of justice. Please join us in lighting our chalice by reading the words in your order of service aloud. We gather this hour
as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, fears and needs. We light this beacon of hope
We are a movement that comes together not around creed, but rather around covenant, around the things that we democratically promise to one another, to each other, collectively, as communities. And so I will invite you in our recovenanting process. So the words won't be on the screen, but they're fairly simple. I believe in your order of service. The response is just, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. And so I'm going to read a few lines from our covenants, and I would just invite you to respond with those words after each line. So for all the ways that we have neglected to expand our spiritual growth and faith in action, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have not committed our hearts and minds to building a community of caring, acceptance, and reconciliation, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. And for all the ways that we have not actively worked to build trust and respect in our community, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. And so in the spirit of recovenanting and of coming back, of renewing our bonds, I invite you to look around the room, look at these beautiful folks that we're gathered with, and also the folks on the other side of the camera. I'm sure there might be a few more who are joining us from home this morning, so waving at them as well, greeting them as well with your smile. Some other folks who are coming in from Spirit Circle as well, and greeting them. Welcome, welcome. And then I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn 95. Hymn 95, there is more love somewhere. It might even come through that door. That was fun. Okay, thanks. Please be seated. So whenever we regather, whether it's in person or over the phone or over Zoom or some other way, there's always the opportunity to share what is within ourselves that we've been holding unspoken, or maybe only spoken to a few people, to bring it back into our relationships with others, to speak it aloud, to let them in on what's been going on for us, and likewise to do the same. So I'm going to come around the room with a microphone, and if you have a joy or a sorrow to share, I would just ask that you share your name with us so that we know who you are. Does anybody have a joy or a sorrow this morning? Yes.
My name is Mary Ann, and I have a joy and a sorrow. My sorrow is that I will not be available for the luncheon
The words are in order of service. Please be seated. So last week in our worship service, we talked a little bit about how you can tell when your relationship with yourself is thriving. And that was the first step in our journey over this series, kind of considering what to do living in our society as it currently exists. Not as we would like it to be, but as it currently exists. Which is always the challenge, but sometimes it can feel more challenging, and sometimes it can feel less so. So this morning, we're going to continue that inquiry in a similar vein of how can you tell when your relationship with another person is thriving? How can you tell when your relationship with another person is thriving? And this one gets a little bit more complicated, because when we talk about our relationship with ourselves, well, there's ourself and there's ourself. There's the two people in that relationship are kind of known, but when you talk about your relationship with somebody else, you go, oh, well, it could be this person, or it could be this person, or it could be this person. So even just considering it can feel more complicated, but I'd invite you in that inquiry to just come back to your own experience of relationship, because in any of those, you're still a part of the equation. There's a way that you show up to every relationship in your life as you, on some level. And so the inquiry this morning that I would invite you into is just sitting with that question of how can you tell when your relationship with other people is thriving? And so what we're going to do, like usual, is Jeremy is going to play for a few moments as you consider that silently to yourself. And then I'll invite a few kind of reflections after we share with each other for a couple minutes. And that'll inform the rest of the service as we go forward. So just sit with that question for a moment. How can you tell when your relationship with other people is thriving? So I'll ask you to just turn to one person sitting next to you, maybe two at the most, to just share whatever it is that you feel up for sharing in that. You'll have 2 minutes for the both of you, so you don't need to go into all the details, just some of the headlines. I'll let you know when we're ready. Okay, so having said, whatever came out of you, whatever was shared in that, I would ask you, what did you notice either saying whatever you said or hearing whatever you heard? What stuck out for you? What did you take notice of in that? Yeah.
I think, at least the relationships I have, especially with my older friends, is like when we can call each other out, or just like poke each other a little bit, and then just kind of have fun with that, or then move on. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you. Good morning. When I could continue to be myself.
Beautiful. Yeah, be yourself. Yeah. Yes.
Trust and forgiveness.
Trust and forgiveness. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful.
The word that came to mind for me was spark, like sparking ideas or fun or just like more hope, more possibilities with good friends.
More hope and more possibilities. That's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you, everybody. And we're going to have a story for you now. And I'm going to do a little mic switcheroo just a moment. So the story that we've got this morning is a retelling of the book of Esther, and this is from this book called God is Disappointed in You. And what I love about this book, this is a very creative retelling of every book in the Protestant Bible in a short form fashion, and it's got some cartoons and stuff to go along with it, and it's fairly irreverent. So I've edited this a little bit to be appropriate for a Sunday morning worship service, but it's a quick and dirty version of the book of Esther. And this is the book that is read every year on the Jewish holiday of Purim. And there's actually a couple different versions of it. If you read the version in the Protestant Bible, it's very different from the version in the Catholic Bible because there were some changes that were put in there. This is the one from the Protestant Bible. So when Xerxes was king of Persia, he once threw an epic party that lasted a whole 6 months. At one point during the party, the king got drunk and ordered his wife Vashti to dance in front of his friends. And Vashti said, I don't think that's going to happen. Whatever, King Xerxes shrugged. Let's do some Jell-O shots. His advisors took Vashti's refusal much more seriously, though. They told Xerxes that if he let Vashti off the hook, women all over the empire would start disobeying their husbands, sparking a wildfire of feminist bedlam. And trying to put the genie back in the bottle, King Xerxes was forced to divorce Vashti. Now, Xerxes needed a new queen, so he set up a worldwide beauty pageant. The winner was a young Jewish woman named Esther. As part of her prize, Esther was given a year's worth of beauty products and fancy dining and luxury accommodations at the king's palace. And one of the king's advisors was a Jewish man named Mordecai, who happened to be Esther's uncle. And Mordecai told her not to mention her family, as that would reveal that she was Jewish, which he felt might somehow mess the deal up. He might not like us ethnics, he warned her. And soon after, Esther and Xerxes were married, and Mordecai stumbled upon a plot by a couple of bitter old eunuchs to assassinate the king. And Mordecai exposed the plotters and saved King Xerxes' life, a fact which was duly entered into public record with a gold star next to Mordecai's name. In addition to his new wife, the king also had a new prime minister named Haman. And to celebrate his promotion, the king allowed Haman to parade through town while everybody in the streets bowed and shouted wonderful things at him. And Haman really got off on parades and ass-kissing and was having a mind-blowing good time. But when he returned to the palace, the best day of his life abruptly ended because there was one person out of the whole city who refused to bow as he walked past. The party pooper was Esther's uncle, Mordecai. Haman immediately complained to the king. And Mordecai explained, bowing's just against my religion. Well, it's a religious thing, the king said, closing the matter. But this slight continued to haunt Haman, stinging him in his sleep like a pillowcase full of scorpions. Haman vowed to have his revenge by not only murdering Mordecai, but his entire race as well. That'll teach them to ruin a parade. So one day, while the king was buried under paperwork, Haman slipped a decree into the pile, ordering the execution of Mordecai and all the Jews in the Persian Empire. "What's this?" the king asked. "Oh, nothing, just a death warrant for some fringe group who has their own set of laws. Apparently, they don't think your laws are good enough. Well, we can't have a bunch of haters running loose. If you think it's a good idea, I'll just go ahead and put my seal on it." And so the king tossed his signet ring to Haman. It was just a sort of casual thing. And perhaps hoping to later turn the extermination of the Jews into a board game, Haman used a set of dice, or Purim, to select the date on which the genocide would begin. It's from these dice that the Jews get the name for their feast of Purim, Pur dice. So late one night, Xerxes was suffering from insomnia, and he started reading the public records, hoping to bore himself to sleep. And while reading, he saw the gold star next to Mordecai's name, and he realized that he'd forgotten to reward Mordecai for saving his life. You know, as you do, somebody saves your life, you kind of forget about it. So the next morning, he asked Haman what he should do to reward somebody who'd done the king a really big favor. And Haman, of course, thought the king was talking about himself. He didn't realize he was talking about Mordecai. And so Haman thought he'd make up a really great reward for himself. He said, "Well, I think anybody would love a really nice parade. Not just any parade, though. They should be led through the city on your horse and wearing your favorite jacket. And somebody should run in front of him shouting his praises, and everyone should be forced to look at him and think he's cool. Now that would be a parade." And Haman said, "All of that, just tickless with anticipation." "Perfect," the king replied. "Could you do it?" "Do what?" Haman said. "Make the arrangements, be the guy who leads him through town, telling everyone all these great things about him. That sort of thing. I want to give Mordecai a parade he'll never forget." "Who?" "Mordecai. Mordecai, don't you? The Jewish guy. He saved my life once, and I totally forgot to thank him." Scatterbrained, So the king said this, wobbling his crown around on his head a little bit, and Haman burned with humiliation. He returned from the degrading venture even more determined to have his revenge on Mordecai. And to make his vengeance even sweeter, Haman built a special 75-foot-tall spike on which to impale Mordecai. So I don't know how many of you have seen a 75-foot-tall anything, but it's pretty high. I don't even quite reach 6 feet myself. So just imagine a good 15 of me stacked on top of each other. When Mordecai found out about the king's decree and the approaching date of the ordered extermination of the Jews, he went to Esther and he begged her to say something to the king. "I know what I said before about keeping the Jew thing under wraps, but it might not hurt to let it slip, that you're Jewish. It could help out the rest of us a little bit." And Esther responded, "Yeah, but I'd have to wait for him to call on me. If I show up unannounced, his guards will put me to death. And he hasn't called for me in months." And so Mordecai said, "Well, you better think of something. We can't let the future of our people be decided by whether or not the king calls on you in the next couple of weeks." And so Esther was in a bind. Days passed, the day of the planned genocide approached, and still the king had not called for her. And finally, she worked up the nerve and burst in on the king while he was working. "Esther, honeybee, what's the matter? You look nervous." "Oh, is that a rule about being killed for coming in and announced?" "Oh, don't worry about that. That's just an old palace bylaw. Tell me, how have you been? What's going on in your life?" And Esther responded, "Oh, cheetah lips, you're so good to me. I hate to have to ask favors of you, but I do have something really important I need to ask you. I see that you're busy, so I'll tell you what. Why don't you and Haman join me for dinner tomorrow? I'll cook up some antelope steaks and I'll tell you all about it." So the next day, Esther laid out 3 place settings, and after enjoying a pleasant, lighthearted dinner, the king turned to Esther and asked, "So what was that favor you wanted to ask for me?" "Oh, yeah, it's nothing really, but it turns out that there's a law in the books that all the Jews are supposed to be killed. Well, I don't think I've ever mentioned it, but I'm Jewish. So according to the law, I'm going to get killed along with my family and all of my people." And so the king responded, "What? What are you talking about? I never passed a law like that. Apparently you did. It said something about us being a fringe group who'd set up their own laws. Maybe you didn't know what you were signing, though. I know how busy you get. Maybe sometime you just missed that. It snuck past you. And so the king looked angrily across the table at his prime minister. Not cool, Haman. Not cool. Well, to be fair, Haman explained, I did tell you about this. I thought you were going to bust some libertarians, the king said, not exterminate an entire race of people. The king was incensed. Great, now I look like a total racist. Thanks a lot, Haman. Oh, I am so pig-biting mad right now. You'll both have to excuse me. I'm going outside to clear my head for a minute. And seeing the king all roiled up like that terrified Haman. Please, he begged Esther, if I had known that you were Jewish, I never would have. Please, you've got to say something to him. And Haman was groveling so hard that he was on his knees and he was reaching for her and pawing at her, just hoping against hope that she would do something about this. And as if on cue, Xerxes came back into the room at that exact moment and saw Haman's hands on her. And he said, "What the hell, dude? You just don't know when to quit, do you?" At this point, it occurred to Haman that he had probably seen his last parade. And so the king was so irate, he wanted to execute Haman in the most horribly memorable way possible. Luckily, there was a 75-foot spike lying around that did just the trick. And King Xerxes had Haman impaled on it and made Mordecai his new prime minister. And here's the rub, the king explained. I'm afraid my order to kill all the Jews still stands. Once I put my seal on a new law, I just can't take it back. But what I can do is issue a second order to arm the Jews so that they can kill anyone who tries to act on my first order. Sorry, I'm just afraid that's the best I can do under the circumstances of the empire. And so in the following weeks, a war was waged between those trying to kill the Jews according to the king's first order and those trying to protect them according to the second order. And all told, some 75,000 people died as a result of this bureaucratic glitch. Well, let me say, this has certainly taught me a lesson about reading what I sign, the king said. It was a close call, but in the end, the Jewish people were saved from extermination by Esther's courage and, in a strange way, by Vashti's refusal to do a little dance for her king and his visiting guests. So that is the story of the book of Esther and the holiday of Purim. I invite you to open your order of service for our responsive reading. The italicized text is the part that I would ask you to join me in reading, and the other part is the part that I will read. And it's on an insert, so if you pull out the half sheet there, it says, "We Need to Be Resurrected" by Amanda Udis Kessler is the title of it. So I'll read the regular text. I invite you to join me in the italics. Despair is sapping our spirits, damaging our souls, hurting our hearts. We need to be resurrected into hope, faith, and trust. Today, may we be resurrected. Violence is shortening our lives and robbing us of our joy. We need to be resurrected into peace and its many blessings. Today, may we be resurrected. Selfishness is tearing our social fabric, hiding us from one another, turning us inward. We need to be resurrected into generosity, compassion, and open-heartedness. Today, may we be resurrected. Fear is pitting us against each other, stripping our delight, poisoning our relationships. We need to be resurrected into courage and connection. Today, may we be resurrected. Injustice is devaluing and dehumanizing us all, punishing some terribly, frightening others deeply. We need to be resurrected into justice and healing. Today, may we be resurrected. Hatred is breeding despair, violence, selfishness, fear, and injustice among us and among our children. We need to be resurrected into love. Today, may we be resurrected. So may it be. Amen. So I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn 325, Love Makes a Bridge.
Love breaks the walls of language, gender, class, and creed. Love gives us strength to soothe the heart of every cage. Love brings the hopes and beaten down. Love breaks the chains and stand our ground. Love brings the bells of wanted birth and wedding day. Love guides the hands that promise more than words can say. Love makes the bridge that won't be shaken yet not destroyed. Love carries through this.
Please be seated. So I told a story that I won't recount in a previous worship service about getting a gift of a gift certificate for skydiving for a birthday of mine in a relationship where there were some miscommunication issues between us about what constitutes a good gift and what is desired and so on. As one sometimes does, I tried to implement those learnings in the next relationship that I was in. And so we had a more explicit conversation about how exactly do we feel loved, and what is important to us, and what's valuable, and so forth. And so one of the very small things was we started, this other partner and I, we would just hold hands as we were driving. And it was this very sweet thing of just physical contact as we were going in transit from one place to another, running some chores or something else. And just having that, it's a very, very small thing, but having that conversation and taking those small actions made all the difference in how we were able to relate to each other. It was a degree of sharing that I had never learned in my family growing up and from my friends or anything like that. The understanding that I'd have is, well, you just go on and you expect people to treat you as you want to be treated, and they'll just know what's going on with you. And so this whole process of actually sharing what was important to me was a really valuable learning that I did along the way. And why I bring this up this morning is there is an aspect of allowing ourselves to be changed. When we talk about change in our lives, oftentimes it can seem like the big things. How do we become wealthy, or how do we become a more forgiving person, or how do we get in shape, or there's some kind of project on which we're supposed to embark that's going to take a lot of effort. But oftentimes it's the subtle things, the little things that we think to say to one another, the small little day-to-day elements that we choose to attend to or not. And the reason why that's important in our worship service this morning is it's easy for folks in our society, especially folks who have a little bit more privilege, to lapse into what UU minister Forrest Church called the sin of sophisticated resignation. The sin of sophisticated resignation, where we feel like we have a sense of how things work, we've sort of reasoned it out, we kind of know how the world works, and so we're not going to do this, and we're not going to do that, we're kind of going to do this instead. And those of us who have some kind of privilege can all too easily get used to this stance of resignation. And when it's an interpersonal thing, that might not be a huge deal. I mean, it can impair our relationships and our intimacy to some extent. But as a society, as a culture, the impact can be much bigger. It can keep us from becoming aware of how great the forces of injustice and evil actually are. As Rebecca Parker put it in her book, A House for Hope, much in our dominant culture can lull people into numbness, complacency, or compliance. Staying awake, becoming active rather than passive in the world requires something more of us, something we cannot do alone. Religious communities can enable people to claim and deepen the values that the dominant culture is ignoring or denying. They can convert us from lifestyles that disregard the earth and are heedless of the environmental damage and danger we are courting, to lifestyles of reverence and gratitude that enable us to be less materialistic and more attentive to the goodness of life's intangibles. They can free us from consuming unsatisfying, intellectual junk food, and give us deep nourishment through the bread and wine of spiritual traditions, sacred texts, intellectual quests, meditation, and prayer. After the worship service last week, there were a couple of folks who reached out to me to say that they had been disturbed by what we had used as the story for our worship service last week, which was this skit called Inner White Girl that was played on Saturday Night Live a few years ago, starring Leslie Jones and Reese Witherspoon. And the setup of it is at the beginning of the skit, there's this little black girl who is granted this gift of having an inner white girl for her whole life to help her out in times of trouble. And so the most of the scene takes place in a bank where she's continually frustrated by the answers that she's getting from the people who work there. And then Reese Witherspoon, her inner white girl, pops up to give her a little counsel and encourage her to face what it is that she's facing. In the skit, Leslie Jones is protesting whenever there is some kind of rule or expectation of the status quo that might be a sign of racism, which is also very much a status quo way the world operates, just a layer of racism laced into so much of what we do on our day-to-day lives. And so Leslie Jones is standing up and saying, well, what about this? And why is this this way? And then Reese Witherspoon, her inner white girl, patiently tries to guide her through all these hoops, promising that everything's going to be okay if you just do the right thing. And then at the very end of the skit, they're hit with this one that Witherspoon's character can't deal with. They have to wait. And Leslie Jones' character is very comfortable with waiting. And so she's okay, that's fine, but Reese Witherspoon's character just can't stand it, and she's the one who goes off. And last week I said a couple of sentences about the skit and the significance in the series, that each of them have their own ways of being set off. But I wanted to go a little bit more into it this week, because the dynamic of exactly what's going on with each of them is a bit distinct. Leslie Jones, when she's met with this adversarial interactions, protests. She's frustrated, she's angry, she stands up for herself. And Witherspoon tries to calm her down, tries to get her frustrations, her anger to calm down. And then when Witherspoon is met with some challenges at the end, she doesn't protest, she complains. She just gets frustrated. She's not advocating for herself. She's talking about how terrible it is, this thing that is happening to her. Witherspoon was all calm and cool and collected as long as she expected to win. But the moment that she got handed something she didn't expect, she was defeated. UU ethicist Sharon Welch wrote in her book, A Feminist Ethic of Risk, the expectation of certain victory leads middle-class activists to disillusionment in the face of defeat, to cynicism in the face of partial remedies to overwhelming problems, or to acquiescence to the efficient, triumphal workings of even unjust power. There's something about feeling more agency in our day-to-day lives that suddenly when we're met with a challenge, we're more likely to just give up and despair. Whereas if we're used to those challenges, we're more likely to understand there might be some ways around it and to work with it. In this book, Sharon Welch compares what she calls an ethic of control to an ethic of risk. She talks about this ethic of control as being something that middle-class white folks especially tend to have. Used to police treating us a certain way, used to banks treating us a certain way, used to customer service treating us a certain way. And she compares that to an ethic of risk that isn't about trying to get something in particular to happen, but it's more about laying the groundwork for future possibilities to occur. That everything is open to contingency. Everything is open to challenge. Everything is open to wrestling. Within an ethic of risk, Welch writes, action begins where middle-class thought stops. Action begins in the face of overwhelming loss and the recognition of the irreparable damage of structural evil. One of the points that Welch makes is that it's intrinsically immoral to act alone and decisively. Anything that we can do just by ourselves, by our own ability to control things, is intrinsically problematic. It's pretty easy in some ways to end a life, to harm someone, to take something from someone else. All of that is a unilateral action that we can take. But to lift somebody up, to nourish them, to create a partnership with them or a coalition or a project together, over that we don't have self-control. Over that we have to create power with other people rather than just exercising our own individual power. The key to this ethic of risk, Welch writes, is the decision to care and to act, although there are no guarantees of success. And this requires immense daring, and it enables deep joy. It's very different from the cynicism that often comes up when we're operating under an ethic of control. The Esther story was written during the reign of the Persian Empire, which was sandwiched in between the Babylonian Empire and Alexander the Great. And so it comes from a literature of people wrestling with what do we do when we're not in power? What do we do when we're in the outskirts of society, when we're subject to the whims of other people who are holding the reins? And so everything is about trying to work with the contingencies, trying to work with the chance, the possibilities as best they can. Mordecai has a sense that in Esther's marriage to the king, there might be an opportunity for salvation. He's alert to that possibility. He's not quite sure exactly what will happen, but when an opportunity reveals itself, they have laid the groundwork to move forward. It's a world of arbitrary sequences in which nothing can be predicted, where the happy ending will justify the whole plot cannot be ascertained in advance. From one viewpoint, it's a world of pure contingency, of who knows. Without any guarantees of any kind, Esther acts and speaks and enters into her freedom. Esther lives in a world of chance in which she chooses to act on the strength of a who knows, a possible scenario of meaningful action. Martin Buber wrote that the prophetic moment is the one when the customary soul enlarges and transfigures itself into the surprise soul. When the customary self becomes the surprise self. We humans are created to be a center of surprise in the universe. When we recognize that things in the world at large might be bleak, that doesn't require us to become cynical. May our love be too deep to become resigned. May we not become resigned to a society that is hostile or destructive of life. There's a sense that we have of power being in terms of omnipotence, the ability to impose ourselves on others. This is where a lot of this debate around cancel culture comes from, of the comedians who complain about being canceled, of not being able to say anything in particular. They're rebelling against any possibility they don't have total control to say whatever it is that they want to say, however they want to say it. As Welch writes, the only type of power that is guaranteed to be successful is destructive power. One can ensure the death of an enemy, but one cannot ensure the cooperation of another in mutually fulfilling and transforming work. The pursuit of guaranteed total fulfillment produces the destruction of life. We cannot be moral beings alone. We need each other to be moral beings. So how do we ensure that we're building that sort of power? I loved what Carl said earlier about just being able to I'm not sure, I want to paraphrase what you said, but I can only think of doing it with an expletive, so I will not do that. But being able to be a little brusque and a little tussly with each other, There's an aliveness that you all were reflecting, is when we know that our relationships with other people, there's a possibility of us bringing forth with each other. And so I'll offer 2 intentional practices that you might use to lean into this a little bit more. And they're fairly similar, so I won't go into all the distinctions between the 2 of them, but one of them is withhold practice, and one of them is a clearing conversation. And so a withhold practice is basically the one-way version of this. If there's something that you're noticing, or let me say instead of if, when there's something that you notice that is coming up between you and another person in your life, that is causing some degree of distance. Maybe it's somebody that you're closer to, maybe it's somebody you don't know as well. When you notice that there's somebody that you're avoiding, or there's somebody that you're complaining about to yourself or to other people, then there's a possibility of approaching them and saying, hey, I would like to feel closer to you. And so there's this thing that I've been withholding from you. Are you open to receiving it? And so using that noticing in yourself of some kind of discomfort, of something being off, as the spur to come back to them and possibly initiate some intimacy. If it's somebody that you don't actually want to have any relationship with, that's also an option. You're not required to do this with everybody in your life. But if it's somebody that there might be an opening there, I would invite you to engage in this. And the other one is a clearing conversation, which is fairly similar, but it's more two-way. If there's something that you're noticing, some tension you're noticing with somebody, inviting them to sit down with you and to just do some sharing about where each of you is coming from and making some space for it. If you're familiar with nonviolent communication, having some basic structure around when you said blank, I felt X is a fine structure. It's not, you don't necessarily need to do with that structure, but it's a helpful way to start off. So that those practices, those withholds and the clearing conversation, are similar to the recovenanting that we do in our worship services each morning, in that they're not something that you whip out in a time of challenge. If I wait until we're screaming at each other to bring out the covenant, be like, we have this covenant, it's a little too late. I should have been doing that all along the way so that we're staying in relationship. And similarly with the withholds and the clearing conversations, as a means of relationship maintenance, as the days and the weeks and the months of our lives go by, looking for the opportunities to come back with each other so that we feel heard, so that we feel responded to, so that we're able to hear, validate, respond to each other, so that everybody feels empowered through creating and sustaining a context which leads to increased awareness and understanding. Those are the building blocks of learning how to build shared power with each other. Counterculturally shared power, not power over, not I get to do whatever I want, but power with others. In that skit from Saturday Night Live, there's a sense at the end of discord being the end of something. But what if we were to see discord as the beginning of something, habitually? That's where we took it to. When we notice the discord, having that be the invitation to open our relationships in new ways. At its best, love is the gift of gracious, transforming, unexpected invitation into greater life through increased connection and enlargement with others, especially with those that the dominating society has deemed other, or that we have deemed other. In Sharon Welch's words, the public that emerges from mutually accountable work and dialogue is mutually transformative. We do not emerge as the same people, but we all become different. Our traditions reformed as we begin to be liberated or begin to dismantle systems of oppression. And in John Buren's words, we live by shared hope. We make a path by walking it, not alone, together. And we pray that along the way, those who walk with us will be converted and will make a deep personal commitment to this radical form of hope, not for themselves alone, but for everyone. And may we walk forward in that spirit. Amen.
Sorry, I must have dozed off. No, teasing. We choose to welcome the spirit of life, join in our aliveness, and share our resources. This month's Loose Change for Social Change is for the Morning Bishop Theater Playhouse in Gary, Indiana. Their mission is and commitment is to provide relevant services, opportunities for growth and programming through the arts, education, and entrepreneurship. You can read more about it in your insert. We take this in the blue tins, and the basket goes to the church. So can I have 4 people, please? Pardon my awkwardness. For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. Another way we walk together is by joining together for fun and fellowship. I have some announcements here. The Super Soup Sunday winner is Hope Mason with her stuffed pepper soup. We raised $477 with your help, and that's amazing. Also, please stay with us after our service today for our stewardship luncheon, where we will be discussing our goals as a congregation. This is very important. We really need to sustain this wonderful congregation, this wonderful church. Now please rise in body or spirit to join in singing number 311, Let It Be a Dance.
Let your body turn to short time to guide. Ticking as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance with you. May I have this dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sun shine and let it rain. Share the laughter and the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
Awesome. That was fun. Thank you, Jeremy. That was wonderful. Please be seated. Our closing words are from number 695 by Project Plowshares. Lead me from death to life and falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. I invite you now to join in reciting the words listed in your insert in your bulletin. To accompany our extinguishing the chalice, you can read the italicized lettering, please. May we continue to carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment until we are together again. Please join us for our fabulous stewardship luncheon.